The wrench slipped from my grease-stained fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage. Rain drummed against the metal roof like an impatient debt collector, and the fluorescent light above flickered with the rhythm of a dying heartbeat. I'd been elbow-deep in the guts of my '98 Chevy for 3 hours, trying to forget that my wife Jenna hadn't spoken to me in 2 weeks. Then my phone buzzed. "Congrats on the baby, man. Finally gonna be a dad." The text was from my neighbor Pete, complete with celebration emojis that looked mockingly cheerful on my cracked screen. I stared at those words until they blurred together. Baby? What baby? My hands shook as I opened Instagram. There it was, pinned at the top of my feed like a neon sign, advertising my humiliation. Jenna's perfectly manicured fingers holding a positive pregnancy test, her wedding ring catching the light just right. The caption made my blood freeze. Finally pregnant. This will lock him down for good. Blessed and grateful. Forever family. Lock him down? I'd been working construction jobs in Pittsburgh for the past 8 months, coming home maybe once every 3 weeks. The math didn't add up, and Jenna had always been excellent at math. I scrolled through the comments. Heart emojis. Congratulations. You guys will be amazing parents. My mother-in-law had already commented. About time. Can't wait to spoil this little one. The rain outside seemed to mock me with its relentless patter. I could hear Mrs. Dairy next door moving around in her kitchen, probably already brewing coffee for tomorrow's gossip session. In a town like Lakeview, Ohio, news traveled faster than wildfire, and apparently I was the last to know I was becoming a father. I grabbed a beer from the mini fridge I kept in the garage and took a long pull. The bitter taste matched my mood perfectly. Through the small window, I could see our house, the house I'd renovated with my own hands, installing crown molding and refinishing hardwood floors, while Jenna climbed the ladder at Morrison, Blake, and Associates. She'd made partner last year, and suddenly my blue-collar hands weren't good enough to touch her white-collar world. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Frank, my old boxing buddy from Murphy's gym. Saw Jenna's post. "You didn't mention she was pregnant when we grabbed beers last week." "Because I didn't know," I wanted to type back. Because apparently, I'm the last person my wife tells anything to these days. Instead, I typed, "Surprise to me too." Frank's response was immediate. "Want to talk?" Not yet. First, I needed answers. I walked through the rain to our front door, my work boots squelching in the muddy driveway. The house felt different somehow, colder, like it was already preparing to reject me. Jenna's BMW wasn't in the driveway, which meant she was probably at Brady's place. Brady Morrison, the golden boy of her law firm, with his perfect teeth and his trust fund and his apartment that overlooked the lake. I'd never liked Brady. There was something about the way he looked at my wife during firm parties, like she was a prize he intended to win. And the way Jenna's eyes lit up when she talked about their work projects that somehow required late-night meetings and weekend conferences. The living room smelled like Jenna's expensive perfume and something else, cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I followed the scent upstairs to our bedroom, where I found a tie draped over the chair. Navy blue silk with tiny gold anchors. I'd seen Brady wear it to the firm's Christmas party. My hands were surprisingly steady as I booted up Jenna's laptop. She'd always been careless with passwords, using our wedding anniversary for everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her email inbox told the whole story. Messages between Jenna and Brady dating back 6 months, growing progressively more intimate. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. My husband is so clueless. This baby will be perfect. He'll never suspect, and I'll finally have everything I want. There were messages to her best friend Carla, too. The plan is working perfectly. He's been gone so long, he'll never question the timing. Brady's already talking about leaving his wife once the baby comes. But the video file in her downloads folder was what made my vision go red around the edges. Time-stamped from last weekend, while I was in Pittsburgh installing kitchen cabinets for a client, It showed Jenna and Brady at what looked like a lakeside party. She was straddling him on a couch, both of them laughing as she whispered something in his ear. I sat back in the chair, staring at the screen until the words blurred together. 8 months. I'd been gone 8 months, working 16-hour days to pay for Jenna's lifestyle, her car payments, her designer clothes, and she'd been planning this whole time. The front door slammed downstairs, followed by the click of high heels on hardwood. "Danny, are you home?" Jenna's voice carried up the stairs, sweet as poisoned honey. I quickly closed the laptop and made my way downstairs. She stood in the foyer, still in her work clothes, a black power suit that probably cost more than I made in a week. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and her makeup was flawless except for slightly smeared lipstick. "There you are," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I was hoping we could talk." "About the baby?" I kept my voice level, conversational. Her hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. "Yes. I know this is unexpected, but unexpected is one word for it." I leaned against the doorframe, studying her face. "Considering I've been in Pittsburgh for 8 months. Something flickered in her eyes. Panic, maybe, or calculation. "You've been home." "Remember that weekend in March," I finished. "I was home one weekend in March. For your birthday. We didn't have sex, Jenna. You said you were too tired." Her laugh sounded forced. "Well, obviously we did at some point. Maybe you were drinking and don't remember—" "Don't." The word came out sharper than I intended. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me about my own life." She straightened, and I saw the lawyer emerge. The woman who could argue black was white and make a jury believe it. "I don't know what you're implying, but—" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. I've been gone 8 months. You're pregnant. The math doesn't work unless you've been busy while I was away." "How dare you accuse me of what, Jenna?" "Say it. Accuse you of what?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in years, my wife was speechless. I pulled out my phone and showed her the Instagram post. "Lock him down for good? Interesting choice of words." Her face went pale beneath her foundation. "That's not— I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" I meant us, our marriage. This baby will bring us closer together." I almost laughed. Almost. "Right. And Brady Morrison has nothing to do with this?" The color drained completely from her face. "Brady? What does Brady have to do with anything?" "You tell me." "He seems to spend a lot of time here when I'm gone." "He's my colleague. We work together. If you're suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what I know." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers worrying the strap of her designer purse. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. Harder, more like the woman she'd become since making partner. "Fine. You want the truth?" "Yes, Brady and I have gotten close. But it's not what you think. He understands my career, my ambitions. He doesn't make me feel guilty for wanting more than this." She gestured around our living room with obvious disdain. "More than what?" "More than being married to a contractor who smells like sawdust and can't even afford to take me to a decent restaurant without checking his bank balance first." There it was. The truth she'd been holding back for months, maybe years. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, but something sharper and more focused. "So the baby is Brady's." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." She lifted her chin, defiant now. "Even if it was, which I'm not admitting, what would you do about it? Divorce me? You'd lose everything. The house, half your business, everything you've worked for. And for what? Your pride?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I was seeing a stranger. When had she become this person? When had the woman I'd married turned into someone who could plan a betrayal this elaborate and then threaten me with the consequences of discovering it? "You know what, Jenna? You're right. I probably would lose everything in a divorce." Relief flickered across her face. "But here's the thing about having nothing left to lose," I continued. "It makes a man creative." The relief vanished. "What do you mean?" I smiled, and even I could hear how cold it sounded. "I mean, congratulations on your pregnancy. I'm sure Brady will make a wonderful father." I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. "Where are you going?" "To congratulate the father." Brady Morrison lived in Lakeside Towers, the kind of high-rise apartment complex that screamed new money trying to look like old money. The building had a doorman, a marble lobby, and the kind of pretentious art that looked expensive but said nothing. I'd been here once before, for a firm party that Jenna had dragged me to, where I'd spent the evening listening to lawyers talk about cases and vacation homes while I nursed overpriced whiskey and counted the minutes until I could leave. Tonight was different. Tonight I had purpose. Brady's vintage Mustang sat in the parking garage like a cherry-red middle finger pointed at everyone who couldn't afford a car worth more than most people's annual salary. He'd bought it to celebrate making junior partner, Jenna had told me, like a $40,000 participation trophy. I'd brought supplies, a bag of sugar from the 24-hour grocery store, a knife from my toolbox, and a baby bottle I'd picked up from the same grocery store, along with a box of condoms. The sugar went into the gas tank, an old trick that would turn his engine into expensive scrap metal. The knife took care of all 4 tires, the expensive rubber hissing as it deflated, but the baby bottle was my masterpiece. I filled it with motor oil, wrapped it in a condom, and left it on his dashboard with a note written on the back of a McDonald's receipt. "Congrats, Dad. Hope you're ready for 3 a.m. feedings. Danny." By the time I finished, the Mustang looked like it had been mauled by a very methodical bear. I was walking back to my truck when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Saw what you did to Brady's car." Impressive. I stopped walking. The parking garage was empty, except for the security cameras, their red lights blinking like electronic eyes. I typed back, "Who is this?" "Someone who thinks Brady Morrison has had it coming for a long time. Check your email." My hands were shaking as I opened my email app. There was a message from a Gmail account with no name, just numbers. The subject line read, "Thought you should see this." The attachment was a video file. I clicked play and immediately recognized the interior of Murphy's Bar, the dive where construction workers and mechanics went to drink away their paychecks. The video showed Brady at the bar, obviously drunk, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. "My wife thinks I'm going to leave her for Jenna," Brady was saying, his words slurred. "But why would I leave a woman with money for a woman whose husband fixes toilets for a living? Jenna's good for a few laughs, but she's not wife material. Not for someone like me." The woman laughed. "So what's this about a baby?" Brady's grin was ugly, predatory. "Insurance policy? She gets pregnant, pins it on the husband, I get all the fun with none of the responsibility. And if things get messy, well, it's not my name on the birth certificate." The video ended. I stared at the screen, my hands clenched so tight around the phone that I was surprised it didn't crack. Another text. There's more where that came from. "Brady Morrison isn't as careful as he thinks he is." I typed back, "What do you want?" "Nothing. Just thought you deserved to know what kind of people you're dealing with. Check Jenna's social media in about an hour. Things are about to get interesting." I drove home in a daze, the anonymous texts playing over and over in my head. Someone else knew about Jenna and Brady. Someone with access to information and the technical skills to remain anonymous. Someone who wanted Brady destroyed as much as I did. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Jenna's car was gone again, probably back at Brady's place, trying to figure out who had vandalized his car. The irony was delicious. She was probably comforting him over the damage I'd caused. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and settled into my recliner, the same chair where I'd watched football games and late-night movies, back when Jenna and I still did things together. Now it felt like a throne in an empty kingdom. My phone buzzed with notifications. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all lighting up like a Christmas tree. I opened Instagram first. Someone had commented on Jenna's pregnancy announcement. Not just any someone. An account with Brady's name and profile picture. "Can't wait to meet our baby, sweetheart. Hope Danny doesn't mind sharing daddy duties." The comment had been posted 20 minutes ago and already had dozens of replies. Confusion, shock, congratulations directed at the wrong man. But it was the responses from people who knew us that made my blood sing with vindictive joy. "Wait, what? Isn't Jenna married to Danny?" "Brady, did you mean to post this on your main account?" "OMG, is this real? Are you saying you're the father?" I scrolled through the comments, watching the confusion spread like wildfire through our small-town social network. Jenna's carefully crafted image was crumbling in real time, one comment at a time. Then I saw it. A comment from Jenna herself posted just minutes ago. "Someone hacked Brady's account. Please ignore that comment. Report it." But the damage was spreading faster than she could control it. Screenshots were being shared, tagged friends were weighing in, and the local gossip machine was revving up to full speed. My daughter Sophie called. She was a sophomore at Ohio State, smart as a whip and social media savvy in the way only 19-year-olds could be. "Dad, what the hell is going on? My roommate just showed me Mom's Instagram, and there's some comment from Brady Morrison claiming he's the father of her baby." I took a long pull from my beer. "Your mother and I are having some marital difficulties. Is the baby yours?" The question hung in the air between us. Sophie had always been direct, a trait she'd inherited from me rather than her mother. "What do you think?" She was quiet for a moment. "I think Mom's been acting weird for months. And I think Brady Morrison is a sleazy piece of shit who hits on college girls at firm parties." "Language, Soph." "Dad, I'm 19. I can say shit. And I can also do math. You've been in Pittsburgh for 8 months. "Yeah. So what are you going to do?" I looked around the living room, at the photos of our family vacations and anniversaries, at the life we'd built together that was now revealed to be mostly lies and convenience. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." "Good. Mom's been treating you like garbage for years. Maybe it's time she faced some consequences." After Sophie hung up, I sat in the dark, watching the notifications pile up on my phone. The anonymous helper had been right. Things were getting interesting, but this was just the beginning. I opened my laptop and started typing a Facebook post of my own. Thanks to everyone congratulating me on the upcoming addition to our family. Unfortunately, I've been working in Pittsburgh for the past 8 months, so the timing is a bit surprising. I'm sure it's just a miracle of modern biology. Jenna can explain the details. I hit post and watched the chaos unfold. The Morrison, Blake & Associates annual partners dinner was held at the Lakeview Country Club, the kind of place where they served $20 cocktails and everyone pretended to enjoy conversations about golf handicaps and stock portfolios. I hadn't planned to attend. These events were Jenna's territory, not mine. But circumstances had changed. I'd spent the day fielding calls from friends, family, and curious neighbors, all wanting to know about the situation with Jenna and Brady. The story had spread through Lakeview like a virus, mutating and growing with each retelling. By noon, I'd heard 3 different versions of events, including one where I'd supposedly caught them in bed together, and another where Brady had confessed everything in a drunken stupor at Murphy's bar. The truth was messier and more satisfying than any of the rumors. I'd bought a new suit for the occasion. Nothing fancy, just something from Men's Warehouse that fit properly and didn't smell like sawdust. If I was going to crash this party, I wanted to look the part. The country club's main dining room was decorated in what I supposed was elegant taste: crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and enough flowers to stock a funeral home. The partners and their spouses mingled near the bar, their laughter carrying the forced quality of people who spent too much time together. I spotted Jenna immediately. She wore a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. Her hair swept up in an elaborate style that showcased the diamond earrings I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. She was talking to Margaret Blake, the firm's senior partner, her hands gesturing animatedly as she no doubt tried to control the narrative about her personal life. Brady stood near the bar, surrounded by junior associates who hung on his every word like disciples listening to a sermon. He'd replaced his ruined Mustang with a BMW. Apparently, having your car vandalized was only a minor inconvenience when you had trust fund money to fall back on. I grabbed a whiskey from the bar and made my way through the crowd, nodding to people I recognized from previous firm events. Most of them looked at me with curiosity, probably wondering why the blue-collar husband was attending without his lawyer wife. "Danny," Margaret Blake appeared at my elbow, her smile bright and predatory. "How wonderful to see you. Jenna didn't mention you'd be joining us tonight." "Surprise," I said, raising my glass in a mock toast. Thought I should celebrate the good news in person. Margaret's smile flickered. "Good news?" "The pregnancy. Haven't you heard?" "Jenna's expecting." "Oh yes, of course. Congratulations. You must be thrilled." Thrilled is one word for it. Though I have to admit, the timing was a bit of a surprise. I could see Margaret calculating, trying to figure out if there was subtext to my words or if I was just making awkward small talk. Before she could respond, the dinner bell chimed, and we all moved toward our assigned tables. I wasn't on the seating chart, another surprise for my dear wife, but I pulled up an empty chair next to Jenna just as the salads arrived. She looked at me with barely concealed panic. "What are you doing here?" she hissed under her breath. "Supporting my wife at her work function." "Isn't that what good husbands do?" Brady was seated across the table, his face carefully neutral except for the muscle twitching in his jaw. He'd been avoiding eye contact since I'd arrived, probably still smarting over his car and the social media debacle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret Blake stood at the head table, tapping her wine glass with a knife. "Before we begin our meal, I'd like to propose a toast to our continued success and to the bright futures ahead of us." Everyone raised their glasses. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Actually, if I may," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, "I'd like to propose a toast of my own." Jenna's hand shot out to grab my arm, but I was already committed. "To new beginnings," I said, raising my whiskey high. "To the courage to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. And to my wife Jenna, who's about to embark on the adventure of motherhood." Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. People raised their glasses, smiling at what seemed like a loving tribute. "Of course," I continued, "the timing is interesting, considering I've been working in Pittsburgh for the past 8 months. But I'm sure modern medicine has an explanation for these little miracles." The murmurs stopped. The room went dead silent except for the clink of someone setting down their glass too hard. And to Brady Morrison, I turned toward him, my smile sharp as a blade. May he get everything he deserves from this situation. Brady's face had gone white. Jenna looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Around us, I could see the wheels turning in people's minds, putting together pieces of a puzzle they hadn't realized they were solving. "Danny," Margaret Blake's voice cut through the silence. "Perhaps we should—" "Oh, I'm not done," I said cheerfully. "See, I've learned some interesting things about modern relationships. For instance, did you know that some people think pregnancy is a way to lock someone down? Fascinating concept, really. The idea that creating a human life is just another form of manipulation." I pulled out my phone, opening the screenshots I'd saved from Jenna's messages to Carla. In fact, I have some text messages here that really illuminate the modern approach to family planning. Would anyone like me to read them aloud? "Sit down." Jenna's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the desperation of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse in real time. "The plan is working perfectly," I read from my phone. "He's been gone so long, he'll never question the timing. Brady's already talking about leaving his wife once the baby comes." The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the air conditioning humming, the distant sound of traffic outside, the rapid breathing of my wife as she realized her career was imploding along with her marriage. Brady stood up abruptly, his chair falling backward with a crash. "I don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do," I said, my voice still conversational, "because I'm not finished." I pulled up the video my anonymous helper had sent, the one of Brady at Murphy's bar. I'd spent the afternoon learning how to connect my phone to the country club's Wi-Fi and figuring out how to cast to their presentation screen. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present Brady Morrison in his own words." The video filled the large screen at the front of the room. Brady's drunken voice echoed through the dining room as he explained his plan to use Jenna for entertainment while keeping his wealthy wife for financial security. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Gasps, shocked murmurs, the scrape of chairs as people turned to stare at Brady and Jenna. I saw Margaret Blake's face cycle through confusion, understanding, and finally cold fury as she realized the scandal that was about to engulf her firm. Brady's wife, a thin, elegant woman named Patricia, stood up from her table across the room. She walked over to our table with measured steps, picked up Brady's full wine glass, and threw the contents in his face. 23 years, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the silent room. 23 years I've put up with your wandering eye and your ego and your pathetic midlife crisis. But this? She gestured toward Jenna. This is where I draw the line. She turned to Jenna, who was still frozen in her chair like a deer in headlights. Congratulations on your pregnancy, dear. I hope you enjoy raising that child on a legal secretary's salary because Brady won't have access to another penny of my family's money. Patricia walked out of the dining room with her head held high, leaving Brady dripping wine and Jenna staring at the ruins of her carefully planned future. I finished my whiskey and set the glass down on the table. Well, I said to the room at large, this has been educational. Enjoy your dinner, everyone. I walked out of the country club into the cool evening air, leaving behind the chaos I'd created. My phone was already buzzing with calls and messages, but I ignored them all. Phase 1 was complete. But I was just getting started. Frank Kowalski had been my friend since high school, back when we were both young and stupid enough to think we could change the world with our fists. Now he ran Murphy's gym, training kids who reminded us of our younger selves and listening to middle-aged men complain about their lives over the rhythmic sound of heavy bags being pounded into submission. I found him in his office at 7 a.m, going over membership applications and pretending he wasn't reading the local news coverage of last night's country club incident on his phone. You've been busy, he said without looking up. Just getting started. Frank was built like a fire hydrant, short, thick, and virtually indestructible. He'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming back to Lakeview and opening the gym. If there was anyone in town who understood the concept of strategic warfare, it was Frank. What do you need? I appreciated that he didn't waste time with questions about my mental state or lectures about taking the high road. Frank understood that some situations called for direct action. Information. Carla Hendricks has been pulling strings behind the scenes, feeding gossip to half the town and encouraging Jenna's affair. I want to know why. Frank nodded. Carla's been coming to my wife's book club for years. Linda might know something. And I need to know everything about Brady Morrison's finances. His wife mentioned he wouldn't have access to her family money, but I want to understand exactly what that means. I know a guy who works at First National. He might be able to help with that. Legally? Frank's smile was grim. Public records are public, Danny. Amazing what you can find if you know where to look. I spent the morning at the gym, working out my frustrations on the heavy bag while Frank made phone calls. The physical activity helped clear my head and focus my anger into something more useful than rage. By noon, Frank had answers. Carla's got a grudge, he said, handing me a bottle of water. Linda remembers her talking about you at book club a few years back. Apparently you two had some kind of history before you married Jenna. I searched my memory. Carla had been around the periphery of our social circle for years, but I'd never paid much attention to her. She was the kind of woman who seemed to feed off other people's drama, always ready with gossip or advice that somehow made situations worse. Then it clicked. The firm's Christmas party 3 years ago. Carla had cornered me by the bar, drunk and flirtatious, making comments about how Jenna didn't appreciate what she had. I'd deflected her advances as politely as possible and avoided her for the rest of the night. She made a pass at me once. I turned her down. "Hell hath no fury," Frank said. "Linda thinks Carla's been working on this for years, slowly poisoning Jenna against you and encouraging her to look elsewhere." "And Brady?" Frank's expression darkened. "That's where things get interesting. Brady Morrison is broke, has been for 2 years. His trust fund got tied up in some bad investments, and he's been living off credit cards and his wife's money ever since. Patricia Morrison comes from old steel money. Her family owns half the commercial real estate in downtown Cleveland. So if she divorces him, he gets nothing. Prenup's ironclad, especially if she can prove infidelity." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. How provable is infidelity these days? "Very, if you have the right evidence." Frank handed me a manila envelope. "Public records from the courthouse. Brady's been served with divorce papers. Patricia filed this morning, citing adultery and requesting an emergency injunction to freeze all joint accounts." I opened the envelope and scanned the legal documents. Patricia Morrison wasn't just angry, she was systematic. The filing included a request for temporary spousal support that would leave Brady with barely enough money to cover his car payment, let alone support a pregnant girlfriend. "There's more," Frank said. "My contact at the bank says Brady tried to withdraw $50,000 yesterday afternoon. The account was already frozen." "So, he's desperate. Desperate men make stupid decisions." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Brady Morrison's name appeared on the screen. I answered on the third ring. "Danny here." "You son of a bitch!" Brady's voice was tight with panic and rage. "You destroyed my life." "I didn't do anything but tell the truth." "You destroyed your own life. My wife froze all my accounts. My credit cards are maxed out. I can't even afford gas for my car." Sounds like a personal problem. "This isn't over. You think you're so smart, but I know things about you too. I know about that job in Pittsburgh, the one where you've been skimming materials for your side projects." I felt ice in my veins but kept my voice level. "I have no idea what you're talking about. We'll see about that. I've got friends in the construction business. One phone call and you'll never work in this state again." The line went dead. I looked at Frank, who had been listening to my side of the conversation. "He's bluffing," Frank said. "Maybe. But desperate men don't always bluff. So what's the plan?" I thought about Brady's threat, about Carla's manipulation, about Jenna's betrayal. They'd all underestimated me, treated me like a simple-minded contractor who could be managed and manipulated. It was time to show them exactly how wrong they were. "We're going to give them what they deserve." "All of them?" "All of them." Frank nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" "Remember that lakeside house where Brady's been taking Jenna? The one that belongs to his law school buddy? Yeah. I think it's time Brady had a housewarming party he'll never forget." The Lake Fest was Lakeview's biggest event of the year, a weekend-long celebration that drew people from 3 counties to eat funnel cake, listen to cover bands, and pretend our dying Rust Belt town still had something to offer. The main stage overlooked the lake, with vendor booths and carnival rides spreading out across Riverside Park like a small city of temporary dreams. I'd been planning this moment for 2 weeks, ever since Brady's desperate phone call and Jenna's pathetic attempt to work things out for the sake of the baby. She'd actually suggested couples counseling, as if there were some middle ground between betrayal and forgiveness that we could negotiate like a business contract. The festival was in full swing when I arrived Saturday afternoon. Families with children moved between the game booths and food trucks, teenagers clustered around the rides, and the older crowd had claimed the beer garden near the stage. It was the perfect audience for what I had planned. I'd spent the morning making final preparations. The banner was ready, a professional quality vinyl print that measured 12 feet wide by 6 feet tall. Frank had helped me test the rigging system twice, making sure we could deploy it quickly and securely. Sophie had driven down from Columbus, officially to help with the technical aspects, but really because she wanted front-row seats to what she called Mom's public execution. "You sure about this, Dad?" she asked as we did a final equipment check behind the stage. "Once you do this, there's no going back." There was no going back the moment she posted that pregnancy announcement. Sophie nodded. She'd inherited my stubborn streak and my sense of justice. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd also inherited my anger toward her mother. The lies and manipulation had affected her too, and she was ready to see Jenna face consequences. Where is she now? Probably at Brady's apartment, trying to figure out how they're going to survive on her salary. I checked my watch. The mayor's introduction is in 20 minutes. After that, I'm on. I'd called Mayor Henderson the week before, explaining that I wanted to make a public statement about family values and community support. He'd been happy to give me 5 minutes on stage. Local business owners making speeches was a Lake Fest tradition, and my construction company had sponsored the event for 3 years running. The crowd was thick near the stage when Mayor Henderson introduced me. I spotted familiar faces in the audience, neighbors, clients, people I'd known for years. Mrs. Derry was in the front row with her church group, probably hoping for some drama to fuel next week's gossip sessions. I also saw Jenna and Brady near the back, standing with Carla and a few other people from the law firm. Jenna looked nervous, like she suspected something but couldn't figure out what. Brady just looked angry, which had become his default expression since his wife had frozen his assets. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Henderson's voice boomed through the PA system, "please welcome local business owner and longtime Lake Fest sponsor, Danny Sullivan." The crowd applauded politely as I walked up the steps to the stage. The microphone felt solid in my hand, and the faces in the audience came into sharp focus. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward for 2 weeks. "Thank you, Mayor Henderson. Thank you all for being here today." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the crowd. "I wanted to talk to you about family values, about truth, and about the importance of community in times of crisis." More polite applause. I could see Jenna pushing through the crowd, trying to get closer to the stage, probably planning to interrupt me before I could say whatever she thought I was going to say. 2 weeks ago, my wife announced on social media that she was pregnant. It was wonderful news, the kind of blessing that should bring a family together. I smiled, letting warmth creep into my voice. Of course, there was one small problem with this miracle. The crowd was paying attention now, sensing that this wasn't going to be a typical Lake Fest speech. "You see, I've been working construction jobs in Pittsburgh for the past 8 months. I come home maybe once every few weeks, and my wife and I, well, let's just say we haven't been intimate in quite some time." A murmur ran through the crowd. I could see people turning to look at each other, putting together the implications of what I was saying. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I do understand basic biology, and the math just didn't add up. I pulled out my phone, holding it up so the crowd could see. So I did what any concerned husband would do. I investigated. Jenna had reached the front of the crowd now, her face pale with panic. She was trying to catch my eye, probably hoping to stop me with a look, but I was beyond her influence now. It turns out my wife had been planning this pregnancy for months. Not with me, of course. I was too busy working to support her lifestyle. She'd been planning it with her colleague, Brady Morrison. The murmur became a buzz of shocked conversation. I could see phones coming out, people starting to record what was obviously going to be a memorable moment. In fact, she sent text messages to her friends describing this pregnancy as a way to lock me down. Interesting phrase, don't you think? as if creating a human life was just another form of manipulation. "Danny, stop!" Jenna's voice carried across the crowd, but I ignored her. "But here's the really interesting part," I continued. "Brady Morrison never intended to take responsibility for this child. He saw my wife as entertainment, something to amuse himself with while he stayed married to his wealthy wife." I gestured to Frank, who was waiting at the side of the stage with our equipment. "I thought you all might like to see the evidence for yourselves." The banner unfurled with military precision, dropping from the rigging we'd installed above the stage. 12 feet of vinyl displaying side-by-side screenshots, Jenna's original Instagram post announcing her pregnancy, and my comment underneath it, "Not my baby. I've been gone 8 months. The crowd's reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps, shouts, the sound of dozens of conversations starting at once. Phones were everywhere now, capturing the moment for social media posterity. But I wasn't finished. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present Brady Morrison and my wife Jenna in their own words." The speakers crackled to life, playing the audio from Brady's drunken confession at Murphy's bar. His voice echoed across Riverside Park, explaining his plan to use Jenna for sex while keeping his rich wife for financial security. The crowd turned as one to look at Brady, who had gone white as a sheet. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Asshole!" and others took up the cry. I could see him trying to push his way toward the exits, but the crowd was too thick and too angry. Then Patricia Morrison appeared, walking through the crowd like an avenging angel. She'd been shopping at the craft booths when my speech started, but she'd heard enough to understand what was happening. She walked straight up to Brady and slapped him across the face with a sound that carried even without amplification. 23 years, she said, her voice somehow audible in the sudden silence. 23 years I wasted on you. She turned to address the crowd, her voice clear and strong. My husband is a lying, cheating parasite who has been living off my family's money while screwing around with married women. I've filed for divorce, and he won't see another penny from me. The crowd erupted in applause. Someone started chanting, "Patricia! Patricia!" and others joined in. She smiled and waved like a politician, clearly enjoying her moment of public vindication. Jenna was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as she realized her carefully constructed world had collapsed in front of half the town. Carla was trying to comfort her, but even she looked shaken by the scope of the public humiliation. Mayor Henderson appeared at my elbow, looking confused, but trying to regain control of his event. "Danny, I think maybe we should—" "Oh, I'm not done yet," I said into the microphone. "See, there's one more person who helped orchestrate this whole situation. Carla Hendricks has been manipulating my wife for years, feeding her gossip and encouraging her affair because she was angry that I rejected her advances 3 years ago." Carla's face went from concerned friend to deer in headlights in about 2 seconds. The crowd turned to look at her, and I could see her calculating whether she could disappear into the mass of people. "That's right, folks. This whole elaborate betrayal started because one woman couldn't handle being turned down at a Christmas party. She spent years poisoning my marriage, encouraging my wife to cheat, all because her feelings were hurt." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Crazy bitch," and others laughed. Carla's face crumpled, and she started pushing through the crowd toward the parking lot. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the phones recording every moment, at the banner hanging above the stage like a declaration of war. 2 weeks ago, these people had seen me as the cuckolded husband, the fool who didn't know his wife was cheating. Now they saw something different, a man who'd fought back and won. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone, "they say the truth will set you free. Today, I'm free. Free from lies, free from manipulation, and free from people who thought they could use me and discard me when it was convenient." I handed the microphone back to Mayor Henderson and walked off the stage to thunderous applause. The crowd parted as I made my way through, people patting me on the back and shouting encouragement. Behind me, I could hear Mayor Henderson trying to restore order, suggesting that everyone enjoy the rest of the festival, but the damage was done. By tomorrow, everyone in 3 counties would know the story of Danny Sullivan's revenge. I found Frank waiting by my truck, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "How do you feel?" he asked. I looked back at the chaos I'd created, at the banner still hanging over the stage, at the crowd of people still buzzing with excitement over what they'd witnessed. Like I finally told the truth. Sophie appeared, her phone in her hand and a satisfied smile on her face. "Dad, you're already trending on TikTok. Lakefest drama has over 10,000 views." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. They'd called me the villain, the bitter ex-husband who couldn't let go, but at least I'd never lied about whose baby it was. The end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.